wind, a relentless phantom, howled its ancient psalm through the skeletal branches of the old oaks, rattling the window panes of the isolated farmhouse. Elara, her hands calloused from years of toil, watched the gathering storm with a familiar dread tightening in her chest. Outside, her husband, Thomas, a man whose strength rivaled that of the gnarled oak, was frantically securing the last of the livestock. His broad shoulders hunched against the biting wind. Their son, young Finn, barely more than a wisp of a boy, clung to his father's coat tail, his wide eyes reflecting the fear that mirrored Elara's own. This was not just another storm. The air thrummed with a raw, untamed power that spoke of something far grander, far more destructive than they had ever witnessed. The sky, a bruised purple, bled into an ominous black on the horizon, promising a night of unprecedented fury. Their home, nestled deep within the valley, felt suddenly vulnerable, a small vessel adrift in a churning sea of elemental rage. Thomas, sensing the urgency, gestured sharply towards the barn, his voice swallowed by the rising crescendo of the wind, urging Finn inside. Elara remembered her grandmother's tales, whispered by the hearth on similarly dark nights, of storms that swallowed fields whole and swept away entire homesteads. Those were stories, she had always thought, exaggerated by time and the human need for drama. Yet, as the first fat drops of rain began to fall, striking the glass like tiny, frantic fists, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Thomas burst through the door, his hair plastered to his forehead, his face grim. He pulled a heavy wooden beam across the door, the thud echoing through the quiet house, a futile barrier against the encroaching chaos. Finn, now inside, clung to Elara's skirt, his small hand trembling. Elara knelt, pulling him into her embrace, feeling the rapid beat of his heart against her own. She whispered reassurances, words she hoped would calm not just him, but herself. The aroma of simmering stew, forgotten on the stove, mingled with the scent of damp earth carried in on Thomas's clothes, a stark contrast to the burgeoning violence outside. The storm broke with a terrifying suddenness. Lightning ripped across the sky, momentarily illuminating the world in stark, blinding white, followed by a thunderous clap that shook the very foundations of the house. The wind shrieked, a banshee's wail, tearing at the roof shingles, sending loose objects skittering across the yard. Rain lashed down in sheets, blurring the world beyond the windows into a watery haze. Elara moved instinctively, grabbing oil lamps and matches, her movements precise and practiced. Thomas, meanwhile, moved towards the fireplace, stoking the dwindling embers, seeking the comfort of its warmth and light. He spoke little, his eyes constantly scanning the room, assessing, planning, his mind already calculating the next necessary action. Finn, tucked between them on the rug, watched the fire, its flickering light dancing in his wide, innocent eyes, a fleeting moment of peace amidst the gathering storm. Hours bled into a timeless eternity. The house groaned and shuddered, a living thing under siege. A tree branch, thick as Thomas's thigh, crashed against the side of the house, sending splinters of wood flying and leaving a jagged scar on the exterior wall. Elara gasped, clutching Finn closer, her breath catching in her throat. Thomas swore under his breath, his jaw tightening. He moved to inspect the damage, his hand hovering over the weakened wood, a silent testament to the storm's relentless power. The rain continued its merciless assault, drumming against the roof, gurgling in the overflowing gutters, a never-ending symphony of destruction. They huddled together, the meager warmth of the fire their only solace, their faces illuminated by its flickering glow, silent witnesses to nature's raw, untamed fury. The silence in the house, broken only by the storm's roar, was heavy with unspoken fears and desperate hopes. As the night wore on, a new fear began to gnaw at Elara. The wind, now a sustained roar, seemed to carry a strange, metallic scent, sharp and acrid. Thomas, his senses heightened by the danger, also noticed it. He stood, his gaze fixed on the small crack in the wall where the branch had struck. The smell intensified. It was the scent of burning wood, faint but unmistakable. A spark, perhaps from the lightning strike or the friction of the branch, had somehow ignited a hidden fire within the old timber. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through Elara's fear. Fire, in the midst of a raging storm, was a death sentence. Thomas, his face grim, gestured for Elara to stay with Finn, his voice low and urgent. He grabbed the bucket of water they kept by the hearth for emergencies and moved towards the source of the smell, his movements deliberate, his resolve unwavering. He worked quickly, dousing the area, the water hissing as it met the smoldering wood. Smoke, thick and choking, billowed into the room, stinging their eyes. Elara coughed, pulling Finn's head into her shoulder, trying to shield him from the acrid fumes. The crackle of burning wood grew louder, a hungry sound. Thomas returned to the hearth, grabbing more water, his muscles straining as he lifted the heavy bucket. He moved with a quiet intensity, his focus unwavering, every action geared towards combating the immediate threat. He knew, as Elara knew, that if the fire took hold, their chances of survival were slim. The storm outside raged unabated, a cruel irony, making any escape impossible, trapping them within their burning home. Hope, a fragile flame, flickered precariously in the smoky darkness. The fire, however, was stubborn. It seemed to breathe, drawing strength from the old wood, the scent of smoke growing stronger, more pervasive. Thomas fought it with a grim determination, his body a bulwark against the encroaching inferno. Elara, meanwhile, moved through the house, her mind racing, assessing their options. The windows, thick with layers of condensation, offered no escape, only a blurry glimpse of the chaos outside. The front door, heavily barred, was their only potential exit, but venturing out into the full force of the storm seemed suicidal. She looked at Finn, his face smudged with soot, his small body trembling, and a fierce maternal instinct surged through her. She would not let the fire claim them. She would fight, just as Thomas fought, for their survival. Suddenly, a gust of wind, more powerful than any before, tore through the valley, rattling the house with renewed vengeance. A section of the roof groaned, then splintered with a deafening crack. Rain, cold and relentless, poured into the house, drenching the smoldering wood and cascading down the walls. It was a brutal, shocking invasion, but it was also a miracle. The deluge, channeled by the shattered roof, extinguished the stubborn flames, leaving behind only the hissing sound of cooling embers and the acrid smell of smoke. Thomas, drenched and exhausted, slumped against the wall, breathing heavily, relief washing over his strained features. Elara, tears stinging her eyes, could only stare, her heart pounding with a mixture of terror and overwhelming gratitude. The storm, in its destructive rage, had paradoxically saved them. The rest of the night passed in a blur of chilling dampness and lingering fear. The storm continued its relentless assault, though the immediate threat of fire had passed. They huddled by the dying embers of the fire, shivering, listening to the incessant roar of the wind and rain. Finn, exhausted by the ordeal, had finally fallen asleep in Elara's arms, his small face peaceful in the dim light. Thomas, ever vigilant, kept watch, his gaze scanning the ruined roof, his mind already planning the repairs that would be needed when the sun finally rose. He would rebuild, he knew, as he always had. Their life in the valley was one of constant struggle against nature, but it was also a life of resilience, of unwavering determination. As dawn approached, a faint, almost imperceptible lightning appeared on the horizon, a delicate promise of a new day. The storm, as if exhausted by its own fury, began to recede, its roars diminishing to a mournful sigh. The rain softened to a steady drizzle, then stopped altogether. Thomas, his eyes heavy with sleeplessness, rose and carefully unbarred the front door, pushing it open with a creak. The scene outside was one of devastation. Trees lay uprooted, their massive forms sprawled across the land like fallen giants. Fences were shattered, and the fields, once neat and orderly, were now a muddy, scarred landscape. The barn, though still standing, had lost part of its roof, exposing its skeletal frame to the gray sky. Elara emerged behind him, Finn still cradled in her arms, now stirring. Her gaze swept across the ruined landscape, a sigh escaping her lips. It was a sight that would break a weaker spirit, but Elara was not weak. She was a woman of the land, her roots as deep as the ancient oaks that dotted the valley. She knew the rhythm of nature, its destructive power and its regenerative spirit. She looked at Thomas, his shoulders slouched with exhaustion, but his eyes held a familiar spark of resolve. They had faced worse, and they had always endured. Finn, now awake, stirred in Elara's arms, his eyes blinking in the gray light. He looked at the devastation, then up at his parents, his young face clouded with confusion. Elara knelt, setting him gently on the damp earth. "Look, little one," she said, her voice soft but firm, "the storm has passed. Now we begin again." She looked at Thomas, a silent understanding passing between them. They would rebuild, piece by piece, brick by brick. The community, though scattered by the storm, would come together, as they always did, to help each other rise from the ashes of destruction. The sun, a timid sliver, finally broke through the clouds, casting a weak, golden light across the ravaged valley. It was a new day, a clean slate. The air, though still damp, held the scent of wet earth and pine, a comforting aroma that spoke of life and renewal. Thomas moved towards the broken fence, his gait slow but purposeful, already beginning the arduous task of clearing the debris. Elara, meanwhile, led Finn towards the small patch of garden, surprisingly untouched by the storm's full wrath, its stubborn green shoots a testament to life's enduring power. Their neighbors, their faces etched with weariness but also with determination, began to emerge from their own damaged homesteads, their calls echoing through the quiet valley. They were a scattered few, but their collective spirit was unyielding. Old man Silas, his white hair plastered to his head, waved a gnarled hand from his porch, a silent acknowledgement of their shared ordeal and their shared resolve. Young Mary, her hands still trembling from the fear of the night, carried a basket of freshly baked bread, an offering of sustenance and hope. The children, their initial fear replaced by a strange curiosity, began to explore the changed landscape, their excited shouts a welcome sound in the stillness. They were resilient, their young minds already adapting to the new reality. They would grow up with stories of this night, tales of the storm that tested their parents' endurance, a legacy of strength and survival. The women gathered, their movements practical and efficient, already planning the communal meals, the shared efforts that would see them through the coming weeks of rebuilding. The men, their bodies aching, worked tirelessly, clearing paths, assessing damage, their muscles straining against the weight of fallen timber. They were a silent army, united by a common purpose. The sound of saws and hammers began to fill the air, replacing the mournful cries of the wind, a symphony of resilience and determination. The valley, though scarred, was far from broken. It pulsed with the quiet energy of those who refused to surrender, those who found strength in unity and hope in the promise of a new dawn. Elara watched them, a deep sense of peace settling over her. This was their life, a constant dance with nature, a rhythm of destruction and renewal. It was a hard life, full of challenges and unpredictable twists, but it was also a life of profound connection, of community, of unwavering spirit. She looked at Finn, who was now helping Thomas carry small branches, his little brow furrowed in concentration. He would learn, as they all had, the lessons of the land, the power of perseverance, the enduring strength of the human spirit. As the sun climbed higher, warming the damp earth, a sense of quiet triumph settled over the valley. The storm had tested them, pushing them to their limits, but they had emerged, battered but unbroken. They were the riders of a storm, not in the sense of commanding it, but in the sense of enduring its fury, of riding out its destructive waves with courage and resilience. Their home, though damaged, was still their sanctuary, a testament to their unwavering will. The land, though scarred, would heal, just as they would heal, stronger and more deeply rooted than before. The future, though uncertain, was also filled with the promise of rebuilding, of shared laughter and renewed hope. They would plant new crops, mend the broken fences, and rebuild their homes, stronger and more secure than before. The memory of the storm would fade, softened by time, becoming another tale whispered by the hearth on cold, dark nights, a reminder of their enduring spirit. It was a story not of defeat, but of triumph, a testament to the power of human resilience in the face of nature's relentless fury. The valley, steeped in generations of toil and triumph, would bear witness to their unwavering strength, a saga woven into the very fabric of the land.